Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Sports World Weekly for December 19th, 2020. And welcome to a special edition of Sports World Weekly as we put a bow on this very interesting 2020 year in sports and in the world as a whole. Of course, as I've said so many times throughout the past 7 months of doing And That's the Game and Sports World Weekly, I hope that wherever you are across the United States, across the world, that you and your families have been safe and well during these trying times. We've got a special show in store for you today. Of course, all of the seasons that are a lot of what we do on Sports World Weekly wrapped up. Formula One closed off its season last week with the Abu Dhabi race at Yas Marina Circuit, which then saw the completion of Lewis Hamilton's actual 7th FIA World Championship. He finally, with the close of the season, even though he had clinched it 3 races earlier, was able to assume the trophy. We also saw the presentation to Valtteri Bottas for finishing 2nd overall, Max Verstappen P3 overall on the season. Of course, Verstappen won that Yas Marina Circuit race, which gave him a couple of trophies to take home. And then, of course, Mercedes clinching the Constructors' Championship. Of course, there are still lots to be said about things that may happen over the course of the holiday season into 2021 in the Premier League, in Champions League. The football season is by no means over in Europe. A lot of great matches happening this weekend in Champions League. Of course, you have the coming up Manchester United Leeds match, which will be a great one as well. And then the match between, I believe it's Everton and Tottenham that go on battle today. So there are some top 10 matches that are happening across the slate of days to come. And of course, don't forget Boxing Day in a week from now. Boxing Day in Europe for Premier League is one of the biggest, most legendary days in European soccer. So there's going to be a lot to talk about. So even though we will not be on air next Saturday, we implore upon you to not miss out on some of the great events that are going to be happening across the world of sports. Of course, we are still waiting for a lot of things that we are normally undertaking in the late stages of December in the U.S. to begin itself. The NHL season has not yet begun yet. Last night, we got word that the NHL and the NHL Players Association were in an agreement in principle for a season to start around January 13th. It would be only a 56-game season. So that, again, is a downside of things from COVID-19. They are trying to get the season to end on time. Therefore, that is the decrease in the number of games. No discussion as to whether that's going to be held in particular cities in a bubble format, whether it's going to be held by teams in their local markets. We do know that there was a divisional realignment that sort of occurred, which eradicated conferences for the year and just put teams into 4 divisional pods, especially because of the teams in Canada not being able to travel across the border and not wanting to risk a team like the Toronto Maple Leafs getting stranded in Buffalo, where they already have the Buffalo Sabres, a la what happened to the Toronto Blue Jays having to play their entire home season in the AAA park of their franchise. So lots to be discussed about that. The NBA in the midst of preseason, each team having played now about 2 or 3 games in advance of what will be the start of the regular season in just a couple of days from now. So lots of eyes on, of course, the Brooklyn Nets. What will be the way that the Nets compete this year with having actually a healthy Kyrie Irving and a healthy Kevin Durant? What will the Golden State Warriors be like after the disaster that was their 2020 season. Is Steph Curry back? Is he ready to go? Is this fresh restart that he's talking about going to be something that is of interest and of success for the Warriors? Of course, there are all sorts of things with coaching changes that went abound. New coach for the Philadelphia 76ers, new coach for the Chicago Bulls, new coach for the Los Angeles Clippers. Can the Lakers repeat something that is very rarely seen in the NBA now? Can the Lakers repeat for another NBA championship, which would then also be the Lakers' 18th franchise NBA championship, breaking them in the tie that they currently hold with the Boston Celtics? And what will the Boston Celtics look like without Gordon Hayward anymore? Will the Celtics make a splash right before the start of the regular season? They do have that $30 million trade exemption that they can be able to use that may push them over the salary cap. We've got college football playoffs happening. We have conference championships starting last night. Oregon upsetting USC. And remember, Oregon was not originally supposed to play in the Pac-12 championship game. They were the substitute team in the Pac-12 North. Oregon goes in and upsets an undefeated USC, effectively saying there will be no Pac-12 participant potentially in the discussion for college football playoffs. Of course, today, the big game, ACC, Clemson, Notre Dame, part 2. Does Notre Dame have what it takes to beat Clemson again? Or will Clemson shake up the apple cart and put both Clemson and Notre Dame at 1 losses? Of course, there is also the SEC championship game to follow on all of that. Can Florida pull the upset and beat Alabama? If Alabama, Notre Dame, Clemson, and Florida all have 1 loss, if Ohio State loses to Northwestern and has 1 loss, the College Football Playoff Committee is going to have a hard time trying to figure out who is 1 through 4. And then, of course, on top of it all is Brian Kelly's statement the other day about Notre Dame. If Notre Dame goes into the college football playoffs, if they are assigned to the Rose Bowl game as one of the semifinals, Brian Kelly has said Notre Dame may not respond. They may not actually go to that college football semifinal game, which then begs the question, should they lose to Clemson today, does the CFP committee even put Notre Dame in the college football playoffs, knowing that they are going to not play that semifinal game should it be the Rose Bowl? Of course, scrolling at the bottom of the screen, you can see the numbers 10 through number 6, on our top 10 of the season that has been 2020. We are going to break down numbers 5 through number 1 and get his top 10 thoughts on the 2020 year with the host of Title Town Throwdown, one of the senior writers and hosts of SFBN Rhode Island, Nick LeBlanc. He's going to join the show coming up right after this break. You're watching Sports World Weekly, a special end-of-year edition on the Sports Fan Base Network, Rhode Island. Welcome back to Sports World Weekly, a special end-of-year edition as we wrap up the 2020 season. And I'm joined now by the host of Title Town Throwdown, Nick LeBlanc. Nick, good morning and welcome to the show once more again.
Good morning, man, and thanks for having me again. Hey, I love doing this.
Yeah, it's been a interesting 2020 having to do everything virtually.
That's the entertainment of the year.
We've been in virtual studios for most of the year, doing a lot of this from our homes. You and I had the lucky chance of getting to do at least one show together this year in person.
Yeah.
When we did the show at Cranston West in advance of what it was an interesting day of play for us and getting to do some of the RWIL playoffs. Hopefully 2021 will be different and we'll be able to actually do this in a studio like we normally do.
That is the plan. Look, I'm not trying to understate or overstate something here, but 2020 though, it's on its final days, and let you either pack up your bags, get out here. 2021 has a lot of work to do.
Yeah, so we are breaking down the top 10 moments of 2020, and I wanted to bring you on the show, obviously, to get yours, but of course, scrolling there at the bottom, you can see our number 10 through number 6, the Lakers winning the NBA title, Liverpool capturing the Premier League, Naomi Osaka, and the masterclass that she gave at the U.S. Open Tennis Championship, Tadej Pogacar becoming the youngest Tour de France champion in history. He won not only the yellow jersey, capturing the Tour de France, but he also picked up the polka dot jersey as King of the Mountains and the white jersey as the young rider. But of course, he only goes off holding the yellow jersey as the Tour de France champion. And then, of course, the NHL bubbles that were Toronto and Edmonton before everything shifted to Edmonton for the Stanley Cup Finals. We wanted to break down 5 through 1, and then Nick, after the next commercial break, I'm going to get your biggest moments of 2020. But number 5, the Seattle Storm winning their 4th WNBA championship in franchise history. And then, of course, it was a big one this year with everything that went on with all the Black Lives Matters issues, with the WNBA even stopping play by some of the players. But Breanna Stewart and Sue Bird come away with yet another WNBA championship.
Yeah, I mean, the discussion was if there's going to be a WNBA season, and like the NBA players, these fantastic, very talented women, they went into a bubble rotation themselves. They were able to get through it. And Seattle came out on top at the end of it. It was a long, grueling process. They had played a full 22-game regular season, I believe it was, then a full playoffs. So they were there for at least 2.5, maybe 3 months already, playing meaningful games. So the fact that the WNBA was able to pull it off, and the Seattle Storm came out on top, it's great. And honestly, if the WNBA continues to succeed, maybe you'll start seeing other women's leagues, like maybe a women's national hockey league, which something I would like to see. Honestly, I would love to absolutely see that. And look, nothing's ever compared to the NBA, the NHL. Everyone gets that. It's the sad reality of it. But we can get something more like the WNBA. I think people would watch.
The WNBA in its 25th season this year saw its highest television ratings, highest merchandise revenue sales, and its highest social media impact of all previous 25 years. And this one was the most interesting and most trying years for the WNBA. So it says something right there that out of all of the major pro sports leagues and major pro sporting events, even in the United States, the WNBA and the National Women's Soccer League, who we'll mention in a second, were the number 1 and number 2 highest social media impacts this year. You mentioned National Women's Hockey League. Of course, the NWHL is something that does exist currently. They've added a new team this year, the first Canadian team ever, the Toronto Six. However, there are also only 5 teams that exist in the NWHL. They all play in community rinks. I think the Boston Pride are the only team who technically play in a pro style rink because they play at Warrior Ice Arena where the Boston Bruins practice. But also the NWHL has no media partnership. They have no television contracts. They're not like the WNBA or the NWSL, who are seen on national television. So while they exist, I agree with you. I would love to see the NWHL actually become a thing, whereas it just feels like a semi-pro community league right now, especially because the money generation is so small that every single player who works in the NWHL, the players, the coaches, team staff, etc., all have full-time jobs that they do on top of playing these amazing hockey seasons. And I'm hoping that with the NWHL season expected to be in a quasi regular / bubble format, with the Isabel Cup being held at Lake Placid at Herb Brooks Arena, it might put a star on the NWHL season for 2020.
It also put them on, find some way, maybe did an agreement with the NHL Network, put yourselves on TV, give people something to watch. That's all people wanted in 2020, is just something to watch.
Absolutely. And speaking of something that did get watched, CBS Sports picks up the NWSL and explodes it into the stratosphere. The National Women's Soccer League became the first professional sports league in the United States, men's or women's, became the first professional sports league in the United States to return after the March shutdown due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The Houston Dash picked up their first hardware of any time during their experience in the league, winning the NWSL Challenge Cup that was held at Harriman, Utah at Zions Bank Stadium. Of course, the picture out of that most people recognize and seem to always want to send around is Christy Mewis with the entire amount of, I think she had a 24 case of Budweiser beer bottles in her arms. We love that. We love that picture, and we love Christy to death for that one. Of course, she had a great moment later on this year playing in the U.S. women's national team game against the Netherlands, in which she also scored a goal, her first in 6 years. But the story and why the NWSL is in this is not just what they did by coming back and playing this season, but more the fact that they were the first professional sports league to come back. They were the first one to run the bubble format, and they came out of it with 0 positive tests of anyone, team staff, league staff, players, coaches, etc. 0 positive tests, no canceled games, no shutdowns, no anything. And that was pretty impressive.
Oh no, absolutely. The fact that they proved that, hey, a bubble format absolutely does work, that gave hope for both the NBA and the NHL and the WNBA to succeed. And we know that cannot speak this morning. We all saw the success that brought to those leagues. So the fact that the women's league, they're able to get it done, they're able to have their season and award their champion, it gave hope to the other sports leagues.
The NWSL then turned around on the heels of the Challenge Cup and created the NWSL Fall Series, which saw teams play in pods in their respective markets, giving teams a chance to at least say they were home, but they smartly did it in a sort of bubble format as well, keeping the teams and their staffs in bubbles so that the only thing they were doing was going from team residences to training, back to their residences, and then to obviously team residences to the stadiums for their games, which were held without fans. All of the teams within the bubble, i.e. for, say, the Eastern region, Sky Blue FC, along with Washington and Chicago, kept themselves in bubbles as well. So even though they were playing in home stadiums, no one ran into the issue of being in a situation that there were positive tests as well. So they continued it through the fall, again showing there's a way to play games at home and yet still protect yourself. And keeping fans out of the stands might have been the smartest thing the NWSL ever did this year. their viewership on CBS made them one of the highest watched CBS sports events of 2020. And that's a lot to be said given that CBS has the NFL.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that does says a lot. And, surprisingly enough, the NFL's powered through this year without canceling any games miraculously. We'll talk about the NFL later, but the fact that they were the first ones to come back, they succeeded. It's really set the table for the other leagues, and really saying, no, hey, this does work. You just got to do it correctly. And granted, I think what the NBA and the NHL did, I think both systems were flawed. I think the NBA could have done another location in Florida. I think the NHL could have added 1 or 2 extra cities for playoff games, i.e. the Blue Jackets and Lightning. But no, the way that both the NBA and the NHL did their bubbles, the fact that both those leagues as well came out of with 0 cases as well from coaches, players, staff members, and lead staff members. Same with the National Women's Soccer League. Truly amazing.
Number 3 on the list, we have already kind of touched on this in talking about the NBA, but it was also a year where social justice became something that was not a taboo topic in sports for the first time in years. Of course, everyone refers back to about 7-8 years ago, Colin Kaepernick taking a knee during a San Francisco 49ers game. Of course, there is always still the very famous picture of Jesse Owens raising his fist to the sky back in the 60s at the Olympics. But this year finally became a point where social justice and the issues surrounding it no longer became taboo to talk about in sports, and no longer became taboo to be an impact moment in sports. We saw the NBA with Black Lives Matter on the court. We saw it on jerseys. We saw it same in the WNBA. We saw the NHL for the first time ever really make a statement about we skate for, and talking about in different aspects of it. But of course, there was this picture of the game between the Chicago Blackhawks and the Edmonton Oilers, with Matt Dumba making a statement before the game, and then of course the players kneeling on the ice, and the arena with covered in Edmonton with the End Racism logos that really put a point of making a statement of saying this is allowed to be talked about now in professional sports.
Yeah, I mean, there's just no way around it. I think for years that, the NFL, Major League Baseball, the NHL, and some parts of the NBA, they are able to get around it, take people, kind of distract people from it, just by putting on a game out there. But for something, the NHL is looking at the NBA, they're doing this thing. The NFL had something planned. Baseball's already doing this. So the NHL, they didn't really have much of a choice. They had to talk about it. They had to get it out there. And the NBA, we all know that their geographic thing. The NHL, though, you got guys from all over the place, and there's not many players of color in the National Hockey League, but the ones that are there, like Matt Dumba, PK Subban, and a couple of names, Anthony Duclair. Those guys are extremely good and talented too. Yeah, the league is predominant one color. That it's been like that for decades upon decades. But the fact that we also see these players of color, though, and they're successful at it, the NHL is slowly on that way forward as well.
And of course, you mentioned Matt Dumba and PK Subban and Anthony Duclair, who actually started a Minority Hockey Players Association earlier this year that became officially recognized by the NHL Players Association as a caucus member of the NHLPA, which really goes to show that just that overall the NHL players are taking a ear to what's going on with them. Number two, we've mentioned this one in sort of the opening before Nick joined the show, but Lewis Hamilton clinches his 7th FIA Formula One World Championship. And in the standpoint of it, too, broke just about every single record there is, cementing himself as the best Formula One driver in history. He has now led the most laps in Formula One history. He has the most race wins in Formula One history, the most pole wins in Formula One history, and he has tied Michael Schumacher with 7 FIA World Championships. The only record in Formula One Lewis Hamilton does not hold is the most number of races started. That one is held by Kimi Räikkönen, which means that Lewis Hamilton has broken every Formula One FIA record in a shorter time than anyone has ever done it in history. And of course, he also had a great social justice moment by bringing in the hashtag We Race as One movement into Formula One. Lewis Hamilton, in a sport that does not see too many black men succeed, has done something no one else in history has done, and he has become not just a European superstar, but he has become a world superstar.
Yeah, no, just listening to all the amount of accomplishments he's accomplished, I did look into his eyes in that picture saying, I'm going to enjoy this for a little bit, but I'm far from done. I'm not done. I'm done. Keep on going. Keep on powering through. You know, you prove that you're the best. You're showing that you are the best. Keep showing that why you are the best, and you're going to break every single record that is in the sport. And here's the thing. If people still have figured out how to stop him in a race, I don't think they're going to at this point.
That is very true. Mercedes has probably cemented themselves as the best and the most powerful team. They clinched a 6th Constructors World Championship this year, the most ever in Formula One history. And of course, with both Lewis Hamilton, who finished 1, and Valtteri Bottas, who finished number 2 in the world rankings behind Hamilton, both expected to be back in cars at Mercedes next year, it is going to be hard-pressed to figure out where anyone figures out what Pete Bonington and Toto Wolff are doing at Mercedes and be able to stop them. We have our number one story of 2020, and this one is a two-parter because it takes us back to the beginning of 2020 and then brings us to the end of 2020. And it involves almost disastrous situations that were just so shocking to see, but also are a testament to where we have come in engineering. And it starts us off in Daytona back in February. Ryan Newman, on the final lap of the Daytona 500, gets into an accident that sends him barreling down the speedway. The car ended up crashing out on the roof of the car. It took the DIS medical staff and field marshals minutes to be able to get there, but it took them a long time to be able to extract Newman from the car. The feat of engineering to this and the safety that we have seen advance in both NASCAR, in IndyCar, in Formula One, etc., was that 2 days later, about 48 hours after this happened, Ryan Newman walks out of the hospital with his kids. And that was something unbelievable to see.
Yeah, because you see something like this, and everyone immediately thinks of Dale Earnhardt Sr. back in 2001, and that's what ended up costing him his life, unfortunately. And the fact that Ryan Newman, 2 days after this crash, he's able to just simply walk out of the hospital with his kids in his hands, truly phenomenal. And that just proves that he had somebody looking out for him. And don't tell me that Dale Earnhardt, he looks after his own son, but don't tell me he's looking after other drivers too. Dale Earnhardt is definitely with Kevin Newman that day.
Yeah, and the whole more interesting part of this, the sort of like 1 and the 1A part of this, was that about 6 weeks later, Ryan Newman was back in a car racing in NASCAR once again. So this was just a shocking thing to see, where part 2 of this comes into play we sort of bookended crashes this year because then Roman Grosjean, and this is a testament to, again, the feats of engineering. Roman Grosjean's Haas car hits a barricade in Bahrain, splits in half, bursts into flame. Grosjean goes underneath the barricade. You can see kind of in the center of the picture at the apex of that, you can actually see where the halo device is laying in between the barriers. Grosjean climbs out of the car and walks into the medical car and then is walking out of the hospital that night with simply just bandages on his hands from his gloves getting burned off. And he ends up walking away from that whole thing with second-degree burns on his hands.
The fact that he was able to just simply, first off, the fact that he got out of there was amazing. And I would just walk through, just simple burns on his hands. Oh my God.
It is a testament to what feats have been. That takes us 5-1 on the top 10 of 2020 for Sports World Weekly. We're going to take a quick commercial break, and then when we come back, Nick LeBlanc is going to break down his thoughts on the biggest moments in sports in 2020. You're watching Sports World Weekly on SFBN Rhode Island. Welcome back to a special season finale edition of Sports World Weekly on SFBN Rhode Island. Matt Jolles joined by the host of Title Town Throwdown. I had to promote your show right there since you're on this show, Nick LeBlanc, and we just went through the top 10 moments of 2020 in sports as figured by the Sports World Weekly team. Nick, what did you think were the 10 biggest moments in sports this year?
Probably when the day all the sports were coming back, you know, the NBA, the NHL, Major League Baseball, you know, just the fact, you know, we waited for, you know, baseball, they stopped right in the middle of spring training, and the NHL and the NBA, they stopped right in the middle of playoff races. So, you know, it was disheartening to see at the time, but when they came back in late July or early August, it kind of was just able to, you know, give some people something for people to look forward to, watch, take their mind off of everything that was going on. And it was just a good, you know, take a step back, enjoy something on TV that, you know, is going to entertain you, is going to keep you distracted, maybe yell at your TV about 5,000 times. But, no, I think, you know, from when sports had to shut down to when they came back, you know, especially when they came back, it just gave, it was a much needed distraction at the time for what was going on.
Yeah. And you mentioned, of course, about, you know, all of the leagues that came back, and whereas some leagues like the NBA, the WNBA, of course, we mentioned the NWSL, went through not having issues. Major League Baseball had quite an interesting time trying to come
baseball
and eventually getting to the World Series, which was won by the Los Angeles Dodgers. But we had issues with the Miami Marlins. We had issues with the St. Louis Cardinals. We had issues with the Cincinnati Reds. We had issues with, we had issues with the LA Dodgers themselves even. It seemed like just about every team at some point had some issue with COVID-19. Did Major League Baseball fail in the way in which they came back, and what should they learn as they try to apply the 2021 season?
Well, I think after the Cardinals outbreak, you had the stuff with the Reds and the Giants. I believe the Padres here and there, but those are just like very extremely minor outbreaks. They're back on the field within days compared to the Marlins. They missed a week. Cardinals, they didn't play for 17 days. So I think early on, Major League Baseball failed as they got a little bit deeper into August in the quote unquote playoff race. No, they cleaned it up. They cleaned it up a little bit. They went through the entire bubble down one, except in the very last day with Justin Turner. He went out to celebrate with his teammates. Stupidly so. But however, though, he was lucky though that the season was over and that any outbreak that occurred, it was able to just be neutralized by the players themselves. But I think what Major League Baseball needs to do, and this is something I wrote about earlier this week, on how the owners want the players to be vaccinated prior to spring training, which means probably delaying the season a full month. While the players, they just want to start spring training right away and play the full 162-game season. Look, if you had issues following the protocols the first time, what makes me believe that you're going to have no issues following the protocols again, especially if you're a team like the Marlins, who are the youngest team in baseball, and they were in Atlanta before they went up to New York for their first series of the season for preseason games, and Atlanta was like 95% open. So what do you think is going to happen? Young team, and they're in a city where it's 95% open. What do you think is going to happen? But 2 and 2 together.
Yeah, and of course, the Miami Marlins, aside from their COVID-19 news of the 2020 season, in the offseason made a big move hiring Kim Ng as general manager, the first woman to be hired into a senior position in Major League Baseball as a general manager. Of course, she became also the second woman to make news in Major League Baseball this year, as Alyssa Nakken, a former softball player who has learned a lot about the game of baseball, became a first base coach for the San Francisco Giants. So we have a woman on the field in Alyssa Nakken in San Francisco. Now we have a woman in the front office in Kim Ng in Miami. And of course, we've had a woman in the booth for a number of years with Jessica Mendoza. So it's kind of great to see that now finally we keep saying it's 2020. Maybe the it's 2020 finally is becoming the point that women can work in professional baseball as well too. You mentioned earlier about the NFL, and obviously both you and I have written a number of articles about the kind of lunacy that has been the NFL this year, for lack of a better word. And I know you wanted to touch on that because I know that you've talked about this and you've written articles about this. And it's one of your moments of 2020 is what the NFL has done this year.
Yeah, look, when the NFL said that they weren't going to do a bubble, and let me just get this out there. If you're going to do a bubble for the NFL, you're going to need at least 16 stadiums, first off. Either all down south or somewhere. And no one can tell me where you're going to house 32 NFL teams that have 53 players, at least 10 to 15 coaches, training staff. So that's 100 or a little over 100 people per team. Where were you going to house them? You couldn't. So the NFL had to bite the bullet and just say, all right, we got to just try to do this season. We got these protocols. And I think the first 3 weeks, the NFL was doing good. Then you had the outbreak with the Titans and the Patriots. But despite all the reschedulements, all the postponements, everything that has happened in the NFL this year, the product's been good. A lot of the teams have been extremely competitive. And here we are, week number 15 of the NFL season, 3 weeks to go in the regular season before the playoffs. I think the NFL, and right now, my thing with the NFL, you're at the point of no return. You're at the point of no return. You have to finish it out. You have to finish it out at all means. And look, their system was flawed, but from what the NFL has been able to do, play every single regular season game to this point, truly amazing.
Yeah, outside of the NFC least, which you and I have both referred to it as that this year, outside of the NFC least, what would you say has been your biggest surprise team of 2020?
I'd have to say the Miami Dolphins, and look, what Brian Flores is doing down there is incredible. He has those guys motivated, ready to play, and really, I think this is something that Adam Gase never really did for the Dolphins. That Brian Flores is being under Bill Belichick for so many years, taking it 1 week at a time. You're not going to win. You're not going to win the Super Bowl by winning one game. It's not how it works. You got to take it week to week. 1 week you're 0-0. You win the game, you're 1-0 that week. You go to the following week, again, you're 0-0. You win or you lose, you're 1-0, 0-1, and trying to get better. And that's the mentality the Dolphins have had all season long. And really, that's the thing that Mike Vrabel's been doing. And, I think the last couple of years has come out to bite Bill in the butt a little bit, but it's still Bill Belichick, the greatest coach in the NFL.
Yeah, and of course, Bill Belichick is always known for that famous press conference after the Patriots had a really bad loss when he just stood there at the podium for literally 30 minutes, and every single question that got asked him about the game, he just kept on saying, we're on to Cincinnati. Of course, the Patriots go on to Cincinnati that year. They completely demolish the Bengals and then go on to win the Super Bowl at the end of the year. And Belichick kept it up by the next week after the Cincinnati game, saying, oh, we're on to this team, we're on to that team, we're on to whatever. And it became the mantra. It became sort of like the mantra of the rest of that year, to where then it eventually became, we're on to the Super Bowl. And then, well, there was nothing else to be said after that, because it was game over, and it was game over and job done. We're going to take one final break on Sports World Weekly, and then when we come back, Nick and I are going to talk about what we think might be things to watch for in 2021. You're watching Sports World Weekly on SFBN Rhode Island. Welcome back to Sports World Weekly on SFBN Rhode Island. You can check out all of our shows at sfbnri.com. Just click on anywhere on the website you see a logo of our show, or you can click our shows and podcasts button to check out all of the shows that are featured. We are sitting now at, I believe, 14 or 15 shows. We have 4 or 5 new ones about to launch. We are going to be starting 2021 at 19 shows. It is insane to think 7 months ago, when I started with the network, back when we launched And That's the Game, we were sitting at 4. And in 7 months, we are now going to be, in 8 months, so to speak, when we hit January 2021, we're going to be at 19 shows that are a part of the network. And of course, we're launching our very first ever morning show, Snowman in the Morning with Brian Snowman, starts January 4th, 8 to 12 a.m., Monday through Friday. He will have the morning. I will get a lucky chance to hit the afternoon swing as we move, And That's the Game, to a daily Monday through Friday show at 4 p.m. And of course, Nick LeBlanc, my guest on the show today, host of Title Town Throwdown, Thursday nights. And we've got to talk about, to finish up the show today, what we see might be big events or big moments of 2021. I mentioned in the opening of the show some things in the NBA. Obviously, Steph Curry comes back this year. What are the Golden State Warriors going to be? Kevin Durant finally playing in Brooklyn. Gordon Hayward is not in Boston anymore. The NBA obviously has a lot of storylines to it as we sit here about 3 days from the start of the season. Given that, plus then obviously we've got all of the other pro sports leagues to talk about. What are things that you've been thinking about might be big moments for 2021?
Probably, just in basic, the return of, the sports, the traveling from, stadium to stadium. And really, I think the big moment when I think, we'll all know that, the pandemic will truly be over is when we're seeing 30 to 40 to 80,000 fans packing stadiums to watch their favorite team. That's when you're going to know that this pandemic is truly going to be over. And I think that's going to be a big thing. You can, a player will say, they try to block out the crowd in a big moment because they want to focus on, what the pitcher's going to throw or the kind of shot that the skater's going to shoot at the goalie or trying to hit a free throw or just trying to run a play. No, but if you really think about it, crowds have a really big impact on sports, especially in the NFL, especially in baseball and in big moments when there are some, though the game moves at a snail's pace. But really in playoff hockey and the NBA playoff atmosphere is something that was extremely missing this year. I think when fans are allowed back in the stadiums or are able to pack into TD Garden, Fenway, Gillette, the site of the Super Bowl, I think that'll be the true moments in which, we really see the players feed off of the crowds again. And I think that'll be the biggest moment right there. But also on the field and on the ice too. I think it'll be interesting to see how the NFL runs the draft this year, whether Trevor Lawrence has a big decision. Does he want to stay in Clemson? Does he pull an Eli Manning and refuse to play for the Jets? Or does he become the Jets starting quarterback, and does he go 2-14 in his first season?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of questions to be asked. You mentioned, Trevor Lawrence and obviously Clemson in the ACC championship today against Notre Dame, which is a weird thing to say. A part of 2020 is talking about Notre Dame in a conference championship in football. But I think for me is something to look at. This is the last year under the current college football playoff structure. Do we see expansion in college football playoffs in 2021? Because I'm going to say yes. I think we see another game get added to the mix, i.e. 2 games. We see it maybe go to 6 teams with the number 1 and number 2 ranked teams getting a bye in the first round. The college football playoff has seemed to work. The BCS was a dumpster fire. The college football playoff has seemed to work. My thing for 2020, I think, is going to be college football playoffs going to at least 6 teams. And we now have a January madness, so to speak, to go along with March madness.
And honestly, I think, we will see expansion in the college football playoffs, and maybe, what they probably should do is mirrored to what the NFL currently is. The NFL has 1 team on a bye this year, and then you got the 3 division winners and the 3 wild cards. So, the number 1 seed is the most important thing this year in the NFL. So maybe I would like to see, the NCAA mirror that a little bit. Just look at these players, say, listen, this is the type of format you're going to expect when you get to the pro level. So we want to get you ready for it now, so that way you're not surprised by it when you get to the NFL. Because once you get to the NFL, and especially in the playoffs, anything can happen. You can go on any type of run. The Packers, way back in 2010, number 6 seed, they went on to win the Super Bowl. New York Giants, twice. Went on run at the end of the year, starting the wild card round, ended up winning the Super Bowl, and I'm not going to go any further than that.
We're going to put a bow on this season finale of Sports World Weekly with a little quick rapid fire. NBA season starts in a couple of days, December 22nd, first day of regular season games for the NBA. Who do you think comes out with the Larry O'Brien trophy at the end of the season?
My biasism wants to say the Boston Celtics, but that's just me being biased. But I think coming out of the Larry O'Brien trophy, the Lakers, they're a powerhouse, but I would like to see a surprise team this year just rise from the ranks and just steal an NBA championship. So probably my surprise team may be the Utah Jazz. They just have a secretly good season, and I think they upset the Lakers in either the second round or the Western Conference Final, and say they upset a team like the Milwaukee Bucks or the Sixers or whoever comes out of the East. That's always up for grabs in the NBA Finals and win the NBA.
I think Giannis Antetokounmpo and the Milwaukee Bucks finally get it done. NHL, the Toronto Maple Leafs. The Toronto Maple Leafs may finally get this done, yes or no?
No. No.
Tampa Bay Lightning won the Stanley Cup last year. Do the Lightning repeat? We have not seen a repeat Stanley Cup champion in a while.
Last team to repeat were the Penguins, and that was just about 3 or 4 years ago. No, I don't think the Lightning. I don't think the Lightning repeat. I mean, obviously they proved that the 2019 sweep to the Blue Jackets, that was a fluke. That's not who they actually are. They come back and win the Stanley Cup after just being flat out embarrassed by the Blue Jackets. But I don't think the Lightning repeat. I think there are teams that have gotten better in the NHL this year, like the Golden Knights. I think they're going to still be there. The Dallas Stars will still be there. I think the Blues will come back. The Blackhawks should still be there. They got a lot of competition, and even don't sleep on the Bruins. The Bruins will still be very competitive as well because they still got really the main core together, with the exception of Chara, who I'm still holding out hope for that he comes back. But if he doesn't, oh well. But no, I don't think Tampa Bay Lightning repeat.
Major League Baseball, Los Angeles Dodgers won their first World Series since 1988. Are the Dodgers primed to become a new powerhouse in Major League Baseball? Is Dave Roberts onto something in LA, or does somebody else win the World Series next year?
I think the Dodgers have been a powerhouse for a while, but I don't think they're going to be able to duplicate what the Yankees did back in the 40s and the 50s and in the late 90s, early 2000s. And look, I like the Dodgers. I really do. I want to see Mookie Betts succeed out there. I also don't want to see David Price play because that saves the Red Sox a lot of money. But I think the Dodgers are going to be a powerhouse for a while, but I don't see them win the World Series again in 2021.
The last time the Kansas City Chiefs won a Super Bowl, they repeated as Super Bowl champions. Does Patty Mahomes and the Chiefs get it done again, or is this a one and done?
It's definitely not a one and done for them. I see the Chiefs probably win 2 or 3 more titles before with Patrick Mahomes. Maybe even they win as much as the Patriots won with Tom Brady with Mahomes for. It's all said and done. I mean, he's going to be there for the next 11 years. But as for this year, the Chiefs, I think they're still the best team in football, but they got a lot of competition out on the NFC side of it with the Saints, the Packers, the Seahawks, the Buccaneers, the Rams. And honestly, I wouldn't sleep on the Washington football team or the New York Giants. Whoever wins that division, don't sleep on those teams as well because they've been playing great football as of late. I think it's going to be a lot harder for the Chiefs this time around, but I'm going to say the Chiefs do repeat.
Look at what the Washington football team did to the Pittsburgh Steelers, and that really says it all right there. that is a wrap on the season for Sports World Weekly. We thank you all so much for tuning in. We will be off, of course, next week because it is Christmas. The following week after that is New Year's. Stay safe, be well, enjoy your holidays, and we will see you all in 2021. For Nick LeBlanc, I'm Matt Jolles. Thank you so much. Good night.